In today's episode of the Pathwing Presents podcast, I got a very interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Alec Barr, who's hailing over from Askable. Askable.com helps you to run 10 times more research without adjusting your caffeine intake. That's a pretty cool tagline they have on the website. So let's really jump into it, learn more about how they basically help you to equip yourself with participants on demand for researchers. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lucas. So I head up the agency growth team at Askable. I'm also a UX research director by trade, but essentially we exist to make finding participants for user research easier, faster, cheaper, generally speaking. To be honest, for any kind of research, we focus on user research because that's kind of our provenance. But really any kind of research, we can get you access to high quality, good caliber participants fast. We also sort of adjacent to that, do the same thing, but with researchers themselves. So let's say you wanted to conduct some research, but you didn't have access to the researcher or the skill set, or your research team was on annual leave, sick leave, or whatever. We have an on-demand research service where we pair you with experienced, vetted researchers who can run as much or as little of the strategic research process as you would like. So we operate on both ends of the research spectrum.
Very good. That makes a whole lot of sense. Now, tell me maybe a bit about that. So you mentioned, of course, the two sides, right? The researchers, but also the participants can be found by Askable. Now, maybe tell me about sort of the main use case. Like if they, look for participants, you alluded to user research there as well. Who's fitting best? Like what organizations, what types of questions, where do you guys have a sweet spot?
Yeah, so I guess the benefit of what we do, which is not just having a kind of pure play panel like a lot of recruitment agencies, we do active targeted recruitment. So by that, I mean, if you were to give me a brief for a series of participants that you were looking for and we didn't have them pre-existing in our panel, we do paid social media campaigns, we scrape LinkedIn professional groups, we do word of mouth referrals, things like that to find the right people that matches your brief. So because of that, we can there is no sweet spot. We can cater to all needs, whether they're B2C or B2B or even sort of weird niche things in between. My personal role is working with agencies. For the last 7 years, I've been heading up user research and service design teams in agencies trying to conduct research. And one of the problems that always comes along with agencies is that you're sort of at the bottom of the funnel in terms of budget. Client has an idea, client has a budget, client has a project, that project gets passed out to agencies, and then the agency has to allocate, resources and money accordingly. And it's often, by the time it comes down to research, there's a tiny, tiny fragmented amount of budget left. So what Askable does in an agency space, and what I'm trying to enable is say, well, you don't need to break the bank necessarily to do massive market research reports and get a 100-page document that no one ever reads, but just looks really good. What you can actually do is democratize the process, open it up to people that maybe don't even know how to conduct research, which we do through our platform, and just make the whole process a little bit easier. And agencies are a good space for that because they don't always have full-time researchers on hand.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Now, tell me how or who really within those organizations is bringing up Askable to the board, to the table. Is that researchers themselves, or is it marketers that just need a helping hand? Like who's having the initiative to bring you guys up into the space?
Yeah, it's a good question. You would think that it would be researchers predominantly because they're the ones that know the space, but quite often we have just marketers that know about research but haven't conducted it themselves. So I've spent my time almost exclusively in marketing agencies where there's not necessarily a research department, or if there is, it's quite small. So we might get a marketer come through and say, well, I've got a brief. That brief requires us to do some research. Maybe it's stakeholder interviews, maybe it's usability testing, maybe it's sort of longitudinal diary studies or something, and they don't know how to do it. They wouldn't even know where to start. So that's a really great use case for, say, what we call Askable Plus, which is the on-demand researcher service. So we say, well, you don't need to know how to do it. What you want is the insight and the so what afterwards. What recommendations can we make? What changes can we make to our app or our website or something like that? So that's where Askable Plus can be really helpful. The flip side of that is the pure researchers who have got background degrees in psychology and things like that. They know how to write screener questions. They know what they're looking for. They know about eligibility criteria. And the nice thing about our app from their perspective is that you don't need to interact with a sort of an account manager. You don't need to go to a recruitment agency, send them a brief, have long-winded conversations. You can just go into our Build It Yourself app, select screener questions, select demographics, select type of research that you want to do. So it can empower the expert to do things quicker, and it will support the beginners by outsourcing a bit of the legwork.
Gotcha. Makes a whole lot of sense. Now, how do these guys learn about Askable? Like, what's their journey looking like? What channels do they work through?
Yeah, so it depends on which country you're in. So I've been living in Australia for the last 5 years, and Askable is, an established name there. And we've recently, in the last year, sort of come to London, and we're on the ground here. So the UK contingent is slightly different. I would say at the moment, people come across us through word of mouth and our outreach. So we recently sponsored UX London, which is an incredible event and got us a lot of exposure to lots of different companies, and also helped us absorb a ton of the pain points that other people in the UK space are experiencing, or actually the international space, because a lot of people flew in for that. So there's a lot of inbound interest when we're sponsoring events, but there's a lot of outbound reach from us where we sort of contact agencies, in my case, and ask them about their research pain points. And for me personally, I've experienced a lot of those pain points. So it's usually quite an empathetic conversation because I feel the pain of a restricted budget or a limited time frame as sharply as they do, hopefully.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Now, what would you say, what role does the website then play in their journey? Like, how do they how does the digital realm affect?
So the website actually still plays a huge part. Obviously, it's the conversion touch zone, because you need to sign up for an account. If you're an aspiring researcher, you would need to sign up to our Askable Plus platform, where we vet you and ask you kind of aptitude-based questions and things like that. If you're a client, you sign up for an account to start putting a recruitment brief through. So everything kind of funnels down to that. And at the moment, it's the shop window, in the same way that most tech companies' websites are a shop window. I think the difference is that because we were born out of a digital design agency originally, this is a product that came about from our own pain points in trying to find users to conduct research with. For that reason, we emphasize UX a lot on the website. But we go beyond that. We stretch into the market research space. We stretch into the face-to-face space, even things like mystery shopping or kind of contextual inquiry research, ethnographic research, things like that. That would come through our website, but I don't think we quite promote that as well as we can do. So part of my role is to broaden the focus of the messaging on the website.
Okay, very cool. Makes a whole lot of sense. Now, I would like to switch gears a little bit because you alluded a little bit to your background already there. I'm curious, what does a typical day of yours look like? Like, what is typical projects that you would be involved with for Askable?
Yeah, it's pretty varied. I mean, coming from the job that I did before this, where it was all kind of responding to tenders and proposals and coming up with methodologies and plans about how to execute, and then actually going away and executing on that. I've now sort of switched gears to being less craft focused and more enablement. So what I mean by that is people often come to me and would say, I want to conduct this research. We've got enough budget to speak to 20 people, for example, but I'm not exactly sure what the right kind of questions are. And research is a skill, right? It's not just asking questions. You've got to avoid leading questions. You've got to avoid introducing bias. You've got to write the right screener questions to make sure that the people you get are indeed the people that you actually want. And you can screen out people that kind of miss the mark. So day to day, I would probably say I spend equal time speaking to new prospects, people that are interested in conducting more research, whether that's through LinkedIn, email, or over the phone, kind of basic outreach stuff, but also in shaping pitches and proposals that come from agencies that want a little bit of guidance. So I sort of equal parts strategic guidance, but also growth.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Great mix up there. So I got some rapid fire questions for us to wrap it up for today. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Very good. What will be the last book that you've read or the last podcast you've listened to?
Last podcast I've listened to, I'll do it in reverse order. There's a great podcast series called Origin Story, which kind of looks at contemporary phrases and traces them back in history to see where they originated from. So, for example, And they tend to be phrases that are either overused or being used a lot at the moment. So, for example, the history of the word woke was an interesting one. The history of the concept of satire, the history of fascism, for example, anything to do with history and philosophy and moral philosophy in particular is of particular interest to me. So, yeah, highly recommend that podcast if you're interested about learning the kind of etymological underpinnings of concepts that we throw around all day, every day. And then the last book that I read, I'm in a few different book clubs, so it's hard to pin it down. But I've been rereading a lot of behavioral science books at the moment. My background is in cognitive behavioral psychology, and it's applied its practical application to the design world, nudge theory, behavioral economics, all that kind of stuff. And that's very salient at the moment because there's a bit of a crisis in the soft sciences to do with replicating studies that happened in the 70s and 80s, where we said, oh, we know that people's brains operate in this particularly controversial way, but we can codify how that happens. And then now we're redoing the studies and we're finding that the effects aren't quite as strong as they were before. So my world is being sort of turned upside down. And I think books like Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman bears rereading. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Very good. What's the one single thing that your team is currently focused on the most at the moment?
At the moment, it is growth in the UK. We've done a huge amount in Australia, and London is just a massive pie compared to the rest of the world. I guess despite Brexit, we still see ourselves as synonymous with Europe. So, you know, when we talk about London, we're really talking about the continent as well. And that's our focus at the moment, growing our name, our brand, and our client base here.
If there would be no boundaries in tech and you would have a magic wand, what's the one thing that you would fix for your role today?
That is a good one. I would probably say the ability to get knowledge into my brain, right? There is so much stuff out there available to learn, and it's all available at increasingly rapid fire rates. ChatGPT is going some of the way to being able to sort of streamline all of that. But I only have so much, RAM in terms of my memory. And every time something goes in, something else is pushed out. I would love, if I could wave a magic wand, I would love the ability to retain everything that comes past my brain so that I can apply it sensibly to the world around me.
Very cool. Last question. If today would be your very first day, you're joining Askable, what's the one advice you would give yourself?
Personalize. And I mean that in lots of different ways. So, of course, from my background in e-commerce, it's sort of, the value, and you would know it as well, but apart from the value of personalization, of small A/B tests on a website, of being able to tweak and target and conversion rate optimization, this is all really important from an e-commerce point of view. But I found more and more it's important from a relationship point of view. So everyone I deal with, there is no one way to speak to people and about their needs, about their pain points. There's no one way to sell a product, clearly. So I think personalizing when it comes to delivery of messaging on site, delivery of messaging face-to-face, and delivery of product features is what I would ask myself to focus on if today was day one.
Very, very cool. Alec, I really appreciate you took the time with us today to be a guest on Pathon Presents. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discuss on Askable, what's the one thing people should remember?
Super fast access to high quality participants and on-demand researchers whenever you need them most.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathon Presents.
Thank you.